Let's look at some real life deadlift examples now. So this is a quite high percentage of his max actually. So he's doing well. Bar speed looks really good. Really impressed. Simple thing that I'd improve, because he's consistent with he's confident with his positioning. So I just think he's set. He's really well versed. His setup could be a little bit quicker. Like, he's in a really good position to start that he doesn't significantly change, and he just spends 2 or 3 seconds, maybe more than he could do in that start position. Whereas if you think, if your joints aren't stacked, i.e., you're not standing up, and your joints are flexed, your knees flex, hip flexed, etc., in a bent over position, you're using energy. So I get that if you're second guessing yourself in terms of playing around with start position, but he's not. It looks really good. I think he should just be more confident and just get straight into it. But bar path looks great. From this angle, his arms appear really long. I think he's like locking in a kind of slightly rounded T-spine, which looks great. His movement's smooth throughout the lift. There's not a bit of the lift that goes fast, and then it's just a constant speed throughout. So great job. A thing that would be interesting to see for Byron would be taking note of his foot width. Is that his most powerful position to produce force vertically? I'm not sure. It seems maybe like it's on the narrow end of the scale, but it'd be interesting to see. A good way to test this would be just doing a vertical jump and jump up to the ceiling, and then just measure when you're jumping up towards the ceiling which one feels best and where you're jumping highest, and just have a look take a note of where you started and landing. And it may be there for Byron. If so, keep going with that. If it's significantly wider, then I would consider trying your feet a little bit wider on your lighter sessions and see how they feel in terms of force production. But the disadvantage would be with moving your moving your legs wider, then you're going to have to move the hands wider. So it's going to be a trade-off between increasing the range of motion for your arms. So it's whether this kind of power optimization for the lower body is worth the trade-off for the upper body position, but something to play with. So nice, quick, confident setup, transitioning from getting the straps in and setting off. I like it. I really like it. So it looks like he's bracing at the start before he goes down. Yeah, but he's resetting his breath at the bottom. Yeah, I like it. I think positionally, the bar path is excellent in terms of where it's moving from A to B, straight line, ever so slightly back. Yeah, very good. See, the lockout looks really easy. The lockout looks really easy above the knee. It looks like a little bit of a wrestle off the floor. You can see his arms shuddering and shaking a little bit. And his back is almost extended, like it's almost like really, really flat. So we could possibly, to improve the floor speed, you could experiment with playing with a slightly more flexed T-spine, possibly staying within the range of neutral. So basically, like, to me, if it looks a little bit extended there, like almost like a weightlifter doing a pull, which I would think they might have a benefit of rather than the scapula being quite close together, almost letting the scapula separate, trying to make the arms a little bit longer, may help him. If he's not confident in this position, if it's like he's not confident, feeling like he's exposed, like playing around with stuff like stiff leg deadlifts as an assistance exercise, starting off really light and building up, would build confidence in this position. And also, I think playing around with taking that bit out where he's got a nice bit of leg drive from there. I think doing some, say, 12-inch deadlifts or low block pulls where he's starting off with his knee further back, so eliminating that leg drive somewhat could be a beneficial exercise for him to get stronger at. And couple this with getting stronger with a slightly more flexed T-spine may be beneficial. But yeah, great job. If he's going to keep exactly the same technique, I would just I would say trying to build that explosiveness from the floor. I wouldn't change the bar path. Just maybe like putting some speed work would be really beneficial, where he's focusing on enhancing his brace even more and accelerating the bar a little bit faster from the floor. Bar path looks excellent, perfectly straight line, ever so slightly back, no nudging. You can see on this set, usually when I see Ethan stuff, it looks absolutely bob on. You can see ever so slightly. So he's starting off in this position, and then his hips rising before hips are rising, like basically hips are rising at a faster rate than his shoulders for that initial pull. So there, I would reckon maybe starting from that position a little bit more. So maybe with the hips a little bit higher, knees a little bit less over the bar. And this can change from day to day, by the way. This could be his legs just might be a bit tired from doing, say, he might be trying to replicate his usual start position and his legs are a little bit tired from, say, work he's done the day before, or if he's done some squatting or whatever, and his legs just aren't doing as much work as they maybe could. If this is a consistent thing, then setting up with the hips a little bit higher, and you can see that when he's a good little test, he's seeing that he's in this position now where his hips and shoulders are rising at the same time from there and above. So when he gets down to the floor, to kind of keep that tension position, as he gets down to the floor, you can see that maybe his knees shouldn't be quite over the bar quite as much, and he'll have an easier job maintaining that position as he goes up. But generally, what I would say with Ethan, similar to his other lifts, like his technique is excellent. I'd like to see him backing himself a little bit more and hitting the lifts with a bit more intent and speed from the floor. But yeah, try that little tweak of hips a tiny bit higher. So bar path check. Although we can't tell brilliantly from this angle, you can see that it's really good. And it would be nice to see from a side angle, actually. So you can see that this is quite a high percentage for Dan, actually. He's doing a great job. And this would be an example of, even though he's rebending the knee and hitching, for strongman, it's part of the sport. And my kind of view on it is, if you're not building resilience and building skill in that position, then you're kind of missing out a little bit. It breaks my heart a little bit when you see people doing beautiful reps and then at a comp, and then they get to the next rep where they're grinding a little bit and it's a bit slow above the knee, and then they just give up because they don't know how to use the rebending of the knee as an advantage. Would I teach a powerlifter to do this? Definitely not. And you'd be looking at just attacking kind of muscular balance to iron that out. Would you be teaching general population client to do that? No, definitely not, because the hitch generally comes from you pulling with a slightly flexed torso, and therefore to give you that kind of strength off the floor, the reason why you need to rebend the knee is basically because you're in a position above the knee where your back has to extend in order for the weight to lock out. I.e., ideally, what we should be, especially if you're a powerlifter or a general population client, should be looking at making the back move, the back not move, and the back just working isometrically to maintain position and not be pulled into further flexion or extension or whatever. So basically, what you should be able to do, if you can maintain that position, is just focus on extending at the hips, and that will lock you out. Whereas actually, if you're in a position where you're using a little bit of flexion to give you that floor strength, it is going to trade for a more tough lockout, because your back's in a flex position. So if your back's in a flex position to help you from the floor, you are going to have to straighten the back out at some point, which is going to be above the knee. So you can get extremely strong at say back extensions and stuff where you're moving using the back extensors concentrically, or you can couple this with rebending of the knee, where you can get skillful at hitching and basically as you get it above the knee, letting your knee rebend to get under the bar. And then there's various methods that you can use to keep this. A lot of people get scared of hitching because they think that because realistically what you're doing with a hitch is if you're hitching, you're lifting with a rounded back most of the time. But if you're as we see right up to the top level, that if you're lifting and you're focusing on the 3Bs, the bar path is perfectly straight, and your back position is staying fixed. So if you are starting really flex to give you that speed off the floor and strength off the floor, don't let it bend anymore. If you're worried about, say, potentially injuring yourself, don't let it bend excessively anymore. And then number 3, making sure that you're maintaining that brace all the way throughout to maximize the force production from obviously your lower body and your extremities, but also to minimize the likelihood of you flexing even more as you go out. But couple this with the bar path staying close to midfoot, and you can actually that's why a lot of people they hitch and they feel great, and they can recover well from it. So that'll give you a better understanding about rebending the knee and whether it should apply to you and whether it's relevant, and you can make up your own mind of whether to use it or whether to strengthen your body and change your technique in different ways so you don't have to use the hitch. So another thing about using Dan as an example, so you can see here as he breaks the weight off the floor, so he's using these long straps where you can see it's legal in terms of most comps because you can still see his thumbs are in contact with the bar. And the advantage is he's in terms of his back angle, he's getting a much nicer start position than using normal length straps. And then your lockout's just simply a little bit lower. But the disadvantage with really long straps is you can see that as he breaks it off the floor here, because he's not holding it in his hands so much, his hands are moving, and he's failing to create. You're missing out on some potential upper body tension you can be creating which can benefit via irradiation. So basically, gripping the bar, producing more force. Gripping the bar is actually going to produce more global force, which may be a contributing factor to improving the force production a tiny bit more. But a lot of people may find it easier when they've got a better grip on the bar to engage the lats, which if you can engage the lats, you're going to have the lats are going to be great for making sure that you don't let the bar leak forward excessively. So this may be something to play with, even just as assistant stuff for Dan. You may find that using the long straps are great for like his maximal work, but then doing some assistance with some, say, slightly tighter straps, or where he feels more attached to the bar, and just using that to develop his kind of upper body strength and lat strength, etc. And just see how that feels. But yeah, good. The bar path is good from when it leaves the floor. So still at the floor there, and then it's coming up straight line, ever slightly towards a hit, ever so slightly back. So brilliant. So what I like about the principle of deadlifting in a perfectly straight line, ever so slightly back, for those people who potentially get pain or get, say, lower back symptoms when you deadlift. The advantage of doing it in a perfectly straight line and ever so slightly back and getting your technique drilled so you can feel this. If you feel those symptoms of back pain, you are likely to you're most likely to feel it as you're breaking it off the floor, and therefore, if you do feel that discomfort, you can cancel straight away. Whereas people whose find out, like say, the bar path leak and the bar path moves forward throughout the lift, and like say people whose back potentially hurts or who've had an injury at say mid shin or as you're getting towards the shin because the bar's leaking forward, and then exposing you more shear forces through your spine as you lift. The advantage of starting you start if you're guaranteed the bar's moving in a straight line and it's going ever so slightly back, you are starting in the most exposed position possible in terms of shear forces through your spine. So you know that if you can break it off the floor on any given day in that position with that technique, and breaking it off the floor feels good for your back, the likelihood of your back hurting at any of the positions further up the chain is really low compared to somebody whose bar path leaks forward and changes throughout the lift. So a little error on this is as she initiates the pull. So what I like about, she's using the technique of, I think, taking a breath there when the hips are high. So good for maximizing the breath rather than taking the breath when the hips are low. But, and the other good thing is like dropping the hips and using and not waiting at the bottom. As she drops the hips, she's using the kind of the stretch reflex to create like an elastic effect as she initiates a pull from the floor, which is great. But the risk with this, sometimes it can be, if you're like a degree or two out, degree too low, degree too high, it can feel, you can be making the lift a little bit more efficient. So that's the trade-off versus people who set off get into their start position and then pull from that start position rather than raising the hip. So this is something to play with. I think that you should keep up what you're doing, but just watch out for where you drop your hips to, where you want to start your pull from. That's where you're wanting to start your pull from. That's where you're trying to start your pull from. But you can see here that there isn't much hamstring tension there, I don't think. And that's why so you can see ever so slightly, as you initiate the pull, that bar kicks forward. Just look at the barbell. You can't see my finger, can you? But look at the plates. As you initiate the pull and drop the hips, the bar leaks forward ever so slightly and then pulls back into yourself. So when you initiate, when the bar leaves the floor, it goes in a perfectly straight line. But before you actually break the plates off the floor, you actually push the plates forward into a better start position. So there's two options that you can do. You can either start with your hips slightly higher and leave the bar where it is and see if you feel strong in that position, or you can start with the bar a little bit further forward, a millimeter or two further forward, so you're not nudging the bar forward as you initiate the pull and drop the hips. If you're dropping down to this hip position because you feel strong in that position. So have an experiment and see which feels better. And next session, probably better when you're doing your submaximal work, take your video from the side and then you can see, right, are the plates rolling forward at all? Or is the bar just going perfectly straight line? And you'll be able to coach yourself, and you'll be able to play with those two little tweaks and see which one feels better. Yeah, I like this. Very good. Very good positioning. His arms stay in the same position throughout. His torso doesn't change throughout. His feet are looking a nice, strong position. Yeah, I like this a lot. So a simple, very simple cue that's gonna instantly make everything a teeny bit easier at Lockout is by lifting your shorts up. So either rolling your shorts up towards your hip, wearing some tighter shorts. You're working against your shorts there at Lockout, and it's just a waste of energy. Yeah, that the third rep there will feel a little bit easier than what it did there if you're simply not working against those shorts, and it's just a simple fix that you don't need to get any more skillful or stronger at to improve your lifting. What I would do with in terms of your training, you can see that this I'm not sure if it's a deadlift bar. I don't think it's a deadlift bar. I think it's maybe a weightlifting bar with bumper, a nice bit of flex as the bar comes off the floor, not quite as much as a deadlift bar. I would say try, like for your general training, I would say try and get some work in with a bar with slightly less flex. So if you can, on another day, get used to, like, say, working with a stiff bar on with the bumper plates, or if you're using that setup, looks like you're a CrossFit gym, so they probably don't have metal plates, but basically getting a bar set up where the bar is, say, the weight is loaded a little bit closer to the center line, because you're getting in a nice bit of flex here. I can imagine lifting in this setup and it feels really nice, and then you might go to a competition and it's unlikely at competition to be a setup like this. So I would say you're going to benefit from getting some training in on a slightly stiffer bar. But technique wise, looks great, looks really good. And I would say hit it with maybe a little bit more intent, and just notice how your technique just changes as if you go to a different setup on the stiffer bar that may prepare you better for usual strongman setups, and also like if you have to do work on an axle. I find that the transition, if you get better on stiff setups like an axle bar and a stiff bar setup, it'll transfer over to the whippier setups nicely. But sometimes you can get caught out if you're getting used to a really whippy flexy setup and then go to a stiffer setup. Can take quite like a little bit longer to transition over. So I do a mixture of both ideally, but yeah, technique's really good. Bar path's nice. I'd like to see a video next time from the side, as that'll take it to give us a bit more of a picture. So again, bar path, brilliant. When the bar is moving, here, it's brilliant. So it moves from there, a straight line ever so slightly in. But in that start, and what I like now actually is definitely improved a lot in terms of leg drive. He can get a lower hip position now than he used to, and actually maintain it as he lifts. Yeah, so I would say that the bar nudging, he's nudging the bar ever so slightly here. It's subtle here. And by the way, this is a really high percentage for him. It's a really good pull, impressive bar speed. That bar's going in front. So you're finding peeling the bar forward ever so slightly there. And then from here to here is excellent. So if he's showing that he's trying to set up with his hip and shoulders at that angle, look at this angle of his hip and shoulders now. And they rise at the same time, like his hips aren't shooting up. So I would say that he doesn't need to start with a higher hip necessarily, because he doesn't need to start with a higher hip. His hip's not shooting up per se, but the bar is nudging forward a little bit. So I would just say experiment with the bar like a millimeter or two further forward in the start position, and I suspect that you're going to be able to clean up that bar path. Bar path is good, but we don't want to be leaking forward whatsoever. So tidy that up, and take your videos from the side next session. Like what session, doing some like triples with say 50% or whatever to warm up. To warm up. You can use it to warm up, but you can you may find it more like just to optimize your positioning before you add weight, and then make sure that objectively that bar's traveling in a straight line and you're not nudging forward. So I've got a good lift here, and this is a PB lift, by the way. So that's notable because you see a lot of people who have fantastic technique or can demonstrate what seemingly fantastic technique with 50% of the max, 60% of the max, empty bar, whatever. But it's really interesting to see what happens when somebody's at PB territory, especially when their experience. So lifting 275 years, great job, really strong. But what's happening? What can we see happening? And notable that he's using the deadlift suit, so we'll touch on that as well. So you can see, right, as he initiates the pull. Let's look at the bar path check first. Bar path, brilliant. Yeah, you can't see perfectly from this angle, but he's going, it's perfectly straight line. He's not getting pushed forward. It's going ever so slightly back because he's starting with the bar a little bit out in front. Blah, 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 blah. What I don't like, simple fix, he's working against those shorts. It's like you're just wasting so much energy. So either get those shorts lifted all the way up into your crotch, and if you're going for a PB and you're slow at lockout, maybe just banging a little bit of talc on for the sake of performance is going to improve. Is going to make that lockout a little bit easier. Like if you were going genuinely for a max out here, you'd probably get 280, 282.5 if you just move your shorts up and put a bit of talc on your thighs. But in terms of optimization going forward, you can see that he's setting up what appears to be a really good position. But this position here, watch what happens to his hips and his shoulders as he initiates the pull. So as he initiates the pull, his hips are rising faster than his shoulders, which even though he's getting away with it quite a lot in the suit because the suit is kind of holding his torso in position really well. But realistically, he's getting pulled, his back's getting pulled out like into a more flex position, and his shoulders are getting pulled over the bar a little bit more as he initiates the pull. But the thing is that like this positioning is so obvious. The thing is with Mark, like on this one, he doesn't need to, because if you look at the bar speed off the floor, some people like a lot of people probably comment on that if you put it on social media and put, speed off the floor is amazing. But the speed off the floor is amazing because he's getting pulled into this rounded position. So it's either one of two things. It can be just discipline, and it can be, right, well, actually, he's just not working hard enough off the floor and he's being a bit lazy in terms of the discipline of maintaining the position that he's been holding in his warm-up sets as he gets up to his top set, because maybe he's a little bit scared because it's feeling a little bit hard off the floor, so he's letting himself go into that position that's giving him the illusion that the bar's moving easier. But the thing is that, like, if you borrow that kind of efficiency off the floor or speed off the floor, you have to pay it back further up, because you remember you're trading that floor speed in the kind of shoulders over bar rounded position for a less optimal position above the knee to lock out. Because what you're going to have to do here, because you've rounded your back to allow the bar to come off the floor a little bit easier. So your back when you're above the knee, even though you've moved it really fast to the knee, is in this flex position. So that's why if you extend your hips now, and even if you fully extend the hips to the bar, you're still not going to be locked out because your back's in this kind of flex position. That's why I don't agree with the people cueing glutes when they're really rounded over the bar, and because it's not necessarily the glutes, the hip extension that's going to help them finish the lift. The hip extension, they can get to the point where the hip's fully extended, but you haven't finished the lift. And that's why you see some people get stuck almost at lockout with the hips fully extended, is because the back's still flexed So you need to either get really strong concentrically in terms of back extension to get you out of that flex position, or you have to rebend the knee and kind of ramp it up and hitch it, etc. And that's why I'm not a massive fan of using glutes as a cue for people who have the bar above the knee, who are struggling a little bit and the lockout slowed. I think what Mark could do here would be actually work on his, like, he's got so much floor speed that I feel like he could just be a little bit more disciplined from the floor to maintain that position. And I just think that he's going to be, his lockout's going to be rewarded a little bit more if he can resist the urge of being pulled into spinal flexion as he initiates the pull to give him that floor speed, and he maintains a more kind of closer to neutralish spine, then he's going to have a much easier job to lock out. Even if the bar's going slow because it's a high percentage weight, positionally, then he can just focus on glutes, because if his spine's pretty much neutral and he doesn't have to work his erectors concentrically to finish the lift or hitch, then he can focus on the glutes cue and hips cue, because all he needs to focus on is on a strong hip extension to finish the lift. So if being disciplined from the floor doesn't help Mark tidy up this lift, then playing around with a slightly higher hip position may help him, because it might just be a momentum thing where he's actually just tried to lift with his hips a little bit too low. Then they've got shot up. These hips are trying to find a more optimal position that they can maintain, but then that momentum's taking the hips even higher, and then therefore pulling his shoulders over the bar back into a more flex position. Maybe if he starts with his hips a little bit higher in the start position, maybe he'll have an easier job maintaining that position throughout the lift, and less likely for the hips to shoot up. Again, it may feel like it feels a little bit more difficult off the floor, but clearly you can see from this video, the floor speed is something that he can sacrifice a little bit because it's so fast off the floor, considering it's a maximal weight. So a little note on suited deadlift. So Mark's using the suit here, and this may be because he's relatively new to the suit. You can see what he's doing here compared to raw. What he's doing with the compared to raw is he's getting his hips a lot lower. So let's say 85% of whatever weight this is, say 240-ish. I suspect that this position here, I reckon he's going to be able to maintain it, and I reckon the lift's going to look really, really good. And the note being that the hips are a lot lower than they would be if he was lifting in raw, because when he's lifting raw, if he tried to lift with this lower hip position, he'd just get shot up straight away and then get pulled over the bar, and his back would round, etc., etc. The bar path would be all over the place, because you simply don't have as much tension as you do in the suit. And logically, the lower that you can get into the suit in terms of your hip position is the more tension you're going to put into the suit. So if you do a stiff leg deadlift with the in a suit, for instance, and you compare it to raw, you might not actually notice that much difference, because if you think with a stiff leg deadlift in the suit, the tension that you're creating, other than the torso being a little bit tighter, like say you've got a bit more tension through your radiation, like wearing a belt. But in terms of tension and creating in terms of pop in that stiff leg deadlift position, you're not actually putting much tension into the suit. So for somebody who hasn't used a suit before, and they're struggling to imagine what this feels like, imagine you're wearing your tightest pair of jeans and you go and you flex and you bend over with your hips high and your legs almost straight. You are going to feel a bit more tension than, say, if you weren't wearing your tight jeans. Yeah, but you're going to feel a significant amount more tension if you flex at the knee and and allow your hips to sit back down a little bit lower. Like the tension in your jeans is just going to increase significantly. So that's the same principle as what we're doing in the deadlift suit. So yeah, so try and load the deadlift suit by almost feeling like you almost looks like you're crouching down a little bit more. Is going to load the suit a little bit more or significantly more, but there is going to be a cut-off point where you go past the point where you that's optimal. That's going to be, and you're going to get to that. But if you go past the point and you start with the hips too low, the same error is going to creep in as they do in raw, where your hips shoot up to as you initiate the pull, and then you get pulled over the bar. So yeah, if you generally for most people, your deadlift suit is going to afford you to set up with the hips a little bit lower. That kind of lower hip position that some people try and do when they do it raw and then they get shot up out of, you try get closer to this when you're wearing a suit, you're going to be you're going to have more tension in the start position that's going to assist you in maintaining whatever position that you do as you initiate the pull. So that's a thing to note. So I've had the question: Do you need to go for a lower hip position when you're using a suit? No, definitely not. You could just use the same position as raw. But I do feel that most people, if you put your time in, you are going to get a little bit more benefit from getting a lower hip position in the suit, because it's just going to create more. You're going to use the tension that you're creating, but you're still going to get a benefit from just wearing a suit loose and just copying your raw mechanics. So I would find that if you've got loads and loads of time to prep for using a suit and using it more efficiently, then I'd take it to the extreme. I'd do some like speed work, 50% triples, loads of sets, and I would just basically try and crouch down even more until you find your limit where you're like, oh my goodness, I can't maintain that. You get shot up out of, and then you set up just above that position, and then you know that's going to be ideal for you to maintain in terms of. But it's going to take some experimentation to get there and loads of practice in terms of working sets. But if you haven't used a suit before and you prep when you're going to use a suit at your next comp, and you haven't got much time to prep for it, just setting up with similar to your raw, not going too tight with the suit so it's altering your mechanics, you're going to get the benefit of tension or increased tension, just much like an enhanced belt. And if you get confident, the more sessions that you get in or the more sets that you get in, going slightly lower than your raw, you're probably going to find a benefit. But it's probably not going to be worth the risk of going to this like significantly lower position, because it's just going to feel alien, and you're just going to get got shut up all over the place, and you're going to compromise that bar position, compromise the bar path. So yeah, the same principle applies throughout. Always prioritize the bar path. If you've got a really, really short prep for the deadlift suit, then just setting up close to raw, and don't sacrifice your raw mechanics, and see if you can get a couple of percent out of using the suit. Or even if you don't get a couple of percent out of using the suit, but the in terms of performance, but your working set that you do at comp feels a little bit easier to recover from for your other events than it would be if you did it raw, then it's going to be worth it. If you do have a little bit longer time to prep, then I would suggest doing some sessions where you're exploring with this lower hip position and building it up over time, and finding where that threshold is, using 50% speed work roughly to exaggerate that kind of start position and get it really low, and find where the cutoff point is, where you're loading the suit maximally, but you're in a not a good position to produce force. Try and find that sweet spot for you, and also take note that it may change from day to day depending on recovery, but obviously that's the same principle as raw. But yeah, if you have a little bit longer to prep, then trying that and getting used to it and maintaining that integrity throughout the lift is of utmost importance.